Moving on to the next speaker, I'm positive many of you have seen or at least must have heard of his productions. We have Mr. George Bloom. He serves as executive producer at CBS VFX, a division of CBS Television Studios that produces visual effects for Netflix, Apple, Amazon, Paramount, Marvel, CBS, and NBC studios. George leads their innovation lab, where his team developed Parallax, a proprietary virtual production platform. He was nominated for an Emmy Award for Netflix's Stranger Things virtual reality experience. George was also awarded funding from HTC's ViveX Accelerator program to launch his VR idea in education named the Metaverse Channel. George also delivered the TEDx talk, How the Metaverse Will Change Filmmaking.
As VP at Disney and Fox Studios, he built strategic theatrical advertising plans and produced original marketing animation for Toy Story 3, Wall-E, Alice in Wonderland, Cars 2, Tron, The Avengers, X-Men, and Ice Age. George sold an original sci-fi thriller screenplay, The Savior, to Miramax Films. Throughout his career, he's directed more than 500 pieces of original content. Recently completed an AR and immersive exhibit for the Getty Museum. He is now developing interactive experiences for the 2024 Olympic Games. He sits on the Metaverse XR steering committee for Viacom CBS, and he's also a member of the Visual Effects Society, Writers Guild of America, and Producer Guild. Welcome, George.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I have a confession to make. Everything I learned about the movie business was taught to me by a mouse. So it was his birthday last week. He's 94 years old. And this company is probably the most recognized brand in the world. And I don't even have to tell you the name. And what we call that in the motion picture business is awareness. And awareness is probably one of the most valuable, intangible commodities. And it's what you need to launch a film. And there's two types of awareness. One is called unaided awareness, and the other one is called aided awareness. So if you're trying to capture somebody's mind share and they have no idea what the film is about, you're going to spend a lot more capital. And obviously, if you know what the film is about, you're going to spend a lot less. And that's why we have a lot of franchises, 26 James Bond movies, 12 Star Wars, 9, and this was just last year. And these films produced over $51 billion of earnings in their lifetime so far, and that's in, of course, today's dollars. And typically, movies like this get an additional 25% boost on consumer products, licensing, merchandising. So there's another part of the formula that we talked about when you used to work at the Mouse House, and that is, we call it the 4-quadrant formula. And those quadrants are moms, dads, girls and boys, under 24, under 25. But the number one focus of marketing a movie is you want to get everybody who has a pulse. That's the key objective. And we never ever think of a movie as a motion picture. You think of a movie as an emotion picture, because that's what you're selling. Because we all know that everybody inside their hearts is just children of another growth. And that's who you're trying to capture, emotion. That's the business we're in. So content drives adoption, brands drive behavior. And when you work in visual effects, you're constantly working with art and you're working with technology. And I always discovered that art is something that you really cannot measure, and technology you can measure. And they don't always fit together very well. And sometimes technology gets way out in front of art and vice versa. And sometimes it doesn't always fit right. So I'm going to show you an example when it's not exactly a perfect fit.
Buzz, what are you doing?
I'm attempting to break through to the third dimension.
Buzz, you need special glasses for that to work.
Of course, special glasses.
Buzz?
So there's average about 750 movies made every year. That's pre-COVID. And of the 750 movies, less than 5% are 3D. I don't know how many of you have seen a 3D movie, but in the last 20 years, there's been about that much demand. There's really not a lot of 3D movies being made. And I don't think 3D movies really transform a movie. I don't know about you, but a great movie doesn't need 3D to survive. And a great movie can survive without 3D. It's not a paradigm shift. So I see that it's a great added value, but it's not a game changer. So if we look at the top motion picture businesses, I kind of break it down into the market capitalization of these are kind of like the leaders in making content. And you have a market cap totally of about $700 billion, and I kind of call this our passive customers. And if we look at the gaming business, I would say that's the second load, and you see that is about $230 billion. And that's what I call our interactive audience. And if you kind of break it into two succinct groups of customers, you can see there's a variance between the two, but I've really noticed in the last 10 years, if you research, you'll see a scaling happening with interactive. But right now we're looking towards something very different, and that's the next frontier that combines both sets of customers. And that, of course, is our new market, the Metaverse. And there's a lot of mythology between what is the total addressable market of these this new space. I'm not sure. I hear 2 trillion, 3 trillion. So a few years ago, when Oculus in 2016 released their first beta kit, I decided that I got to try to be a part of the future, and I wanted to become a virtual reality developer. So I went to town, and I came up with the idea. I thought Warren Buffett would think this would approve, and I said, let's combine education and virtual reality. And I started something called the Metaverse channel, and fortunately, HTC China was funding new startup ideas, and they financed this minimal viable product. So my idea was, let's take the greatest minds of the past and bring them into the classroom. I thought that would be timeless, whether it be Confucius or Thomas Edison or Isaac Newton, Abraham Lincoln. I thought one of these could really inspire students, or all of them could. And when you look at education, the key thing for a teacher is retention. So obviously, when you hear a lecture, there's a certain amount of retention when you hear and participate with the lecture. But with virtual reality, I really felt that if you could simulate experience, that would be the game changer. And when you look at the tree of education, I noticed that there was a bunch of different subjects that were worth picking. But to me, what seemed like a natural step was physics. So I aimed for physics, and motion of forces seemed like it had the most interesting 3D experience. And obviously there was 3 candidates, and the one that I felt was most obvious was Al Einstein there. So when I broke it down, I thought the revenue stream could happen, business to consumer, business to customers, business to business, whether it be teaching at home your students, because of course tutoring is very expensive, selling this into colleges and classrooms. So the first thing I did is I tried to find an actor who looked like Albert Einstein. And the guy on the left is not Albert Einstein. But if you put the two side by side, you can really see there's absolutely no difference. One's an actor from Hollywood, and that's the real Albert. And so the first thing you got to do to solve this is we scan him, and you have to follow all his consonants and vowels. You also have to capture all the different emotions. And from that, you get a scan, a 3-dimensional scan of this actor. And then you load that into a program called ZBrush, which is a sculpting program that you use to visual effects. It takes about 150 hours to do this. And you look at every image that's available of Albert, and you follow and contour everything in his face. And this is what I kind of arrived at, which is a little more similar. If you look, he'll make you a little smile. There you go. Thank you, Albert. And that's how we kind of net it out. You can see the actual pores. And the subject, oh, by the way, Albert loves to play the violin, and although this was an experiment in education, I wanted to create a little bit of entertainment. So in our lab, I did a motion capture session with a concert violinist, and we could put all that architectural data into Albert's body. And I chose rotational dynamics. I thought, when you learn physics, you learn all the different, gravitational waves and relativity. But rotational dynamics seemed like the simplest formula as a test. And I'm going to show you an excerpt. It's only about 30 seconds long. It was the first export that came right out of the headsets. It's very low resolution. But here's a little taste of what we ended up with.
Assemble the correct variables. Congratulations.
I think that's the right formula, isn't it? Does everybody know this formula? You remember high school? Okay. I got a B- in high school in physics, but I passed. My mom was happy. So the big takeaway for me is virtual reality is an incredibly powerful tool, but for the right thing. How many lessons really can use virtual reality where it accelerates the learning? And I thought in physics, there was probably only about 9 lessons. So virtual reality isn't just a solution for everything. It's not a one-size-fits-all. If you used it for history, imagine if you went back in time and you could see Rome and how the aqueducts could be used. But it's a great tool. I learned a lot from the experience, and that's what it is. I'm getting to be in the rodeo and be hands-on with this. After that, I was asked to produce about 6 other virtual reality experiences. Our biggest client is Netflix. We did something for Star Trek. We did Stranger Things. And we actually took it around the world. See here. Yeah, we took the experience around the world to 8 different countries internationally and translated into 7 different languages. And the great thing about this is there's no manual with how to do something in virtual reality. You're constantly learning. We did 117 versions, I think it was, to actually do the final product. And you're learning how to communicate in something that's never been done. It's not like C++ where you learn it in a year. One of the big takeaways for me was taking the virtual world and the real world and blending it together. And in Stranger Things, I don't know if you're familiar with the show and watch television, but I'm going to show you a clip that was created. We had to create a behind the scenes, how to make it video for the Emmy Awards committee to be submitted. So rather than me talking, I'm going to show you about a 60-second clip that'll kind of explain some of what we did here.
The Stranger Things virtual reality experience had one key mission. It was to create an interactive media faithful to the show. Our vision was to weave the narrative of Joyce Byers' empathetic role so the user assumes her struggle to find her son. The challenge was to design an experience beyond anything that could be achieved from off-the-shelf VR and make it scalable to other platforms. We laser scanned the actual house in Atlanta, which allowed us to build an exact replica in 3-dimensional space. This allowed participants to walk unobstructed through Joyce's home. We used optical tracking so participants could use their own hands and interact with real objects in the virtual world. This interactive dimension added realism by allowing users to explore the home with a flashlight and answer a real telephone. The immersive experience had a story arc with a climatic ending. A behind-the-scenes video of the cast experiencing it for the first time garnered over 1 million views. This memorable interactive experience gave people a unique opportunity to participate in the story world of Stranger Things.
That was actually the cast. We let the cast try it, and we filmed them, and it ended up getting 17 million hits on YouTube. It was so popular. One of the other things we've been starting to experiment was haptics, and we've created a lot of really profound things. We created an elephant where you can reach out and actually feel the skin of an elephant. We put two people in a separate room and they can handshake one another. And we've actually been taking a virtual baseball and putting somebody in New York and putting somebody in LA, and they can throw the baseball back and forth. So once again, we're learning to do things that are just really mind-blowing. I want to talk a little bit about story. As you know, at the end of the day, story is what drives content. And typically in a movie, you have this very specific design linear path where you have the writer and director creating a story. And what we've discovered is you put a story into virtual reality, there's a big problem. There's lots of point of views. It's an open world. And creating a linear story collapses in virtual reality. We have not been able to solve it. If any of you have an idea how to solve this, please let me know. But what works great in this is gaming. Gaming is just an open world, and this is where it really, really accelerates the opportunities in the gaming world. The next thing I want to talk to you about is accessibility. Everybody's talking about the metaverse, and I know it's on everybody's mind share. Right now, about 60% of what's going on in the metaverse is accessible on a phone, whether it be a desktop computer. Now, augmented reality is when you're in a constrained environment and you're wearing goggles that have opacity, like 50% opacity, and the object appears within your environment. And the most optimal way to experience virtual reality obviously is the immersive experience when you're fully enclosed in a virtual reality experience. So once again, all of you can still reach into this world and are not limited by having to have a virtual reality headset. These are like the big players in the space right now. Meta has the Quest, Sony has the PSVR, HTC, and HPV. These are the big dogs in the race. Every 6 months there's an improvement. Right now, the big thing is there's facial tracking. So as you're working within the headset, it's tracking your face. So as you have an avatar, that avatar's face is reacting simultaneously in that space. So when you're connecting with another avatar, it feels very believable in the emotional connection. They're working on foveal eye tracking, where you have depth of field. You bring an object up, the depth of field changes, so it goes to like an f11 to a f2.8. The other things that are happening is just latency. The general install base, they're saying, is around just under 17 million units. I believe for critical mass, we need to be at about 50 or 60 million units to really move the needle on this thing. As we talk about the metaverse, what is the metaverse? Why is it so compelling? I would say it's the internet in 3D. It's an opportunity for us to teleport into a virtual world. And I mean, during COVID, what did we miss the most in our lives? It was travel, socializing. That's what it does. It really is about building almost like a classless society where we can all come together. And Mark Zuckerberg, within 30 minutes of trying the same Oculus that I was working with, he knew it could change the social fabric of the universe. And obviously, we know what he's been doing with his cash flow. So if we kind of look at the big bang of everything that's going on in the space, I want to start to look at some of the companies and communities that are really making a dent in the metaverse. And there's two companies I want to focus on. One is called The Sandbox, and one is called Roblox, which is two companies I want to do a slight comparison on. So if we kind of step into The Sandbox, and you guys had a couple hours, and you ladies had a couple hours too, we would, obviously be able to purchase, NFTs, and we have shoes, and a lot of them really thrive on popular culture. They hire like Snoop Dogg or whoever the latest artist is. They pay them money, they bring them into the metaverse, and once again, to drive customers. And you can be a virtual landlord and purchase your own land. You can actually, buy a virtual car. You can get a little dog that'll follow you around all day and doesn't even poop. So then if you compare that to Roblox, they have their own currency, and Roblox skews 16 and under, where the Sandbox is 18 and above. But once again, very similar. They have live concerts to drive, popular culture. You can buy virtual goods. You can buy a digital animal, virtual objects. You can create some virtual land. So once again, if we kind of look at the flywheel of what pushes these companies, one thing I also want to mention is user-generated content is probably 40 to 50. They really really need the users to build the content up and create more value. The Sandbox really isn't a public company, but it's estimated the market cap's at about $1 billion. Their monthly average users is about 300,000, user base at 500K. They're pulling in a lot of brands. If we just compare that over to Roblox, they've been around about 14 years longer. The Sandbox was originally a mobile game that moved into the metaverse. 383 million, 200, the MAU is huge on this. Market cap is 24 billion. So great company, very popular. I'm sure you all know this, but if you want to take your digital goods and your avatar and move into another world, this notion, this elegant idea of interoperability really doesn't exist yet. The frameworks for all these games and architecture doesn't allow you to make that big shift. So some people say, oh, you're diluting my brand. I don't want you to leave it. It's like, Verizon, you can't leave. But you know what? If you could leave for the creator, I think that would actually increase the value for the creator so he can move so you'd have to do a rebuild if you moved to all these different places. So I believe we have metaverses. We do not have the metaverse. And it's a crowded house. So we're a member of, it's called the Metaverse Standards Company, or organization, and it's about 1,700 of all the biggest companies. And this is like a test bed where everybody's getting together, and you should all join if this is where you want to head, because it's so fragmented and there's so much duplication going on. If we're going to scale this and make this work, this is the company that really, and this is a free organization to join. This is not a governing body. This is a member of the smartest folks. If you took the IQ of all these companies, it'd be bigger than the GDP of LA. So I want to talk a little bit about digital doubles. We're all talking about avatars and digital doubles. So if you want that really photoreal, high-end looking character, the polygon count is really high, and it takes a long time to build. The polygon count on something that's low res, whether you're using voxels or stuff, because most of the metaverse, in my opinion, looks like one giant cartoon. And the reason is it looks, and it's much easier. And the chips inside, the Snapdragon chips and all these chips, they can barely handle the rendering load. So I believe if you're really going to get the metaverse into this photorealistic world, we have to have cloud native. I was at Walt Disney Studios. I left about 9 years ago, and I came over to CBS VFX. And visual effects impacts about 75% of all movies and television. Whether it's removing a pimple or creating an alien or building a New York street in 1933. And there's two types of visual effects, I always say. There's the aliens and monsters, the thing that you all know are obviously visual effects. And then there's a TV show you'll watch and you say, well, what visual effects? And that to me is the ultimate compliment. It's just seamless. So Viacom was a company last year we merged with, and we're now part of a larger conglomerate where, Paramount Pictures, Nickelodeon. And what happened is, we have a catalog of over 30,000 shows, and we pump out about 3,500 episodes of content a year. And some of them are co-productions, where we do co-productions with Hulu, whatever. So there's it is the biggest growth industry I've ever been in, is visual effects. So Top Gun was our big hit last year when we released that. And one of the things I looked at is look at the inefficiency. Every company has their pain points that really hurts. And I looked at where we're kind of overspending or where there's a lot of duplication. And I tried to apply what I've learned in the hands-on experience of virtual reality. And I decided that I would focus on bringing the world to the stage. And the way to do that was, when we go out on location and we film these expensive locations, I started laser scanning the locations and building a database so we could take virtual worlds and bring them to the stage. So what we're starting to do is we're building a database. So before you go on location and we hire a producer or a production company, we ask them to go into the database and see if that location exists. And when we know that we have the location, we ask them to download that. We have a couple different stages, and we load that into an LED screen. And that way you can shoot sunset all day long. You can shoot 5 locations in one day. You don't have to travel. The other thing is we use green screen, which is the older model. But the software has gotten so great that we don't have to worry about So you can't tell the difference between the virtual world and the real world. That's how good the software has gotten. And ultimately for us, when I think about where we're heading and what do we really want and what is the metaverse going to be, I really try to think of like, okay, the goal is, how do we create creator sovereignty? How does it really come together? And my feeling is that, when I talk to different creators who are building upon it, they always talk about how can they work in the multi-chain universe? How can they have proof of ownership and proof of sales? But ultimately, is the only way we're going to be able to do this is by giving the creator the ultimate goal. Some of these slides were actually out of order, my fault. So that is kind of the overview of where I think we're ending up. And I didn't know if anybody had any questions before I go to my last slide. Okay. So this is something I created a while ago, and I had never shown it before. Thank you. Yeah, question.
George, thank you so much. I mean, that was really compelling. I think there's two elements that come to mind. The first is in terms of some of the examples you showed. Customer attraction seems not to be a problem in terms of the initial process, but customer sustainability. So if you look at some of the numbers around users in some of the gaming environments, some of the institutional examples which have emerged over the last 2 years, what's your thoughts on sustainability of customers and some of the mechanisms there? And the second question is quite a basic one. I was thinking about the Mickey Mouses versus the Toy Story today, and the example you were sharing around how the software is advanced. But I guess from a user-consumer point of view, there's some pain points around the commerciality of the devices, the bandwidth. When do you think that we'll be in a position where it is truly immersive and it feels truly immersive like the movie you shared? Sorry, George.
Yeah, I mean, two great questions. The first question is, when I look at the portfolio or the giant moat that's trying to be created, I think the demographic right now in the metaverse is that kind of 16 to 35, and a lot of it is gaming. So if we're going to really push it out for the whole world, there needs to be more utility and purpose in some of the content that's being created, where we have agriculture and medicine. And I think once we have this giant portfolio and the usage can hit all the different quadrants that I kind of referenced similar to the movie, then we'll have a much better opportunity to kind of flatten out all that speculation and really have a metaverse that everybody can use. Because I think the misconception is, it's almost what they hear about blockchain. What I hear a lot today is like, okay, it isn't the thing that's going to solve everything. So it really has to be a case-by-case thing. I want to know what the metaverse can do, what the virtual reality can do, that's so transformative that it moves the needle enough that you actually need to use it. And I think that's going to come up to the creators. But ultimately, that's where I say. And it's all on the technology. The Quest 2, some of them work really, really well, and the speeds are really, really good. But that photoreal universe, Apple keeps talking about their AR device that's secretly going to come out. And that's a whole nother discussion I think we'll have in the question answers. The big three, Meta, Google, Apple, the 30%. No one wants to pay it. No one's wants to run through their ecosystem. So what's the workaround? Even Elon Musk is having that with Twitter. He's trying to sell advertising space. He's going to have to do the same login that Spotify does, where you just go on, you log in, you don't have to have that payment system. So it's going to be an issue of, chasing dollars.
Okay, thank you. So that was an amazing, inspiring speech. Now, a lot of these products are centered on emotion. You are creating a safe place for customers to have emotion, to create attaching experiences that they value. And you point to the exciting opportunity of interoperability, people being able to take their memories and accomplishments with them where they go. But how do we reconcile that with the risks of these open platforms where users may see their value being destroyed as we try and develop what these public spaces and infrastructure rails look like? Do you think it's going to be the role of big companies to play it safe with users' assets for quite some time?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. I wrote a movie many years ago. My father was a writer, and we're a member of the Writers Guild. So you get residuals when every time a movie is showed, every time your screenplay. So if people are using your content, that's the thing. The problem with YouTube TV is all these users come on board, and then all of a sudden they change the algorithms, and you make less money. So how are you going to make income? But you want to have a lifespan that you own your content, and that you're going to be paid residually over time for that content. How does the technology create that? But I think that's ultimately what we're steering for with Web3. People want to have ownership. People don't want to just sell, they want to rent. So it's going to be a give and take, is what's going to be free, what's not going to be free, copyrights. There's a lot of hotbed issues that I wish I could answer.
Thank you.
Hi, George.
Hello.
I'm over here. I'll stand up.
Yes, there you are.
So we spoke at lunch. I'm a video game producer. We have a studio. We're building something which is quote-unquote metaverse. It's a kind of a big subject area to kind of like claim as if we're doing something in, so I kind of stay away from that. My question for you is, in terms of metaverses being a collection of different metaverses and joining up, how do you see the interaction in the industry? Do you see people working together, playing together well? And then just in terms of the channel, we are mobile. So I know you spoke in your presentation about mobile versus AR, VR. What's your sense of, is mobile acceptable enough to be like a true distribution medium and have the consumer feel as if they're actually immersed?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think mobile is a great way to go because it's so universal. I think it's such a narrow niche of how many people actually have functioning virtual reality goggles that there's too much risk. And that's the thing. When I did the Metaverse channel, it was a little bit more of an experiment. I knew that the nascent industry was too early to ever go out with the product. I had a lot of investors wanting to invest, and I just knew it was dead men's trail to go out. So I think, once again, the usability by being on the smaller scale and that you can have that option to go, because is going into a 3D environment going to plus out enough? Is it going to be a game changer? Maybe not. Even though that's a great way to go, I just think having that option, if I just release something solely in virtual reality or solely in the metaverse, there's too much risk. And that's the whole infighting that's going on. Interoperability, the framework. Sandbox probably doesn't want you to take their content that you created into another universe. Well, who has the right to say you can do that or not? Do you have to rebuild it somewhere else with all the different companies that are being built? So that's the conflict that I don't have the answer for. Thank you.